Alright, so now we have our renders that we did in Hypershot. And you can see I actually rendered out two different versions here from Hypershot, just with a different kind of take on the materials. One with more of a kind of matte sheen on the armor, and one with more of the high contrast reflective sheen on the armor. So again, when you export or when you render out in Hypershot, if you click the include alpha channel, then you'll be able to load that selection here in Photoshop and separate out your model from the background, which is pretty important, so that you can, not have to work on that background layer. Generally, I like to pop out whatever it is I'm working on from the background layer, just so that I always have that background to default back to. So I saved those out from Hypershot as TIFF images with alphas, and so here I'm just resaving it as a Photoshop file. Just kind of playing with the opacity here of the more matte version. The problem with the shinier version is that I think the dark's a little too dark, and I think there's just too much contrast in it. So being able to get somewhere between the two renders, I think will be something I want to do here. So just playing with the opacity. I'm also kind of just trying to decide what it is exactly I want to do. Are nice about it. So what I'm actually going to do now is just go into add a layer mask on here, and just kind of paint out parts of one layer into the other, just kind of the parts I like for one render, and mix it in with parts I like from the other render, because certain parts lit, I think, more nicely on one than the other. So just combining it here. This stage in the process is pretty fun. It's probably my favorite part of doing robotic concepts like this, just because you get into the details, and you have a really strong direction for what it is you're doing. It's starting to look cool. I really like working on the details on these things. So there, I'm just kind of painting out certain parts so to bring in some of the darks from the more high contrast image, high contrast materials. I like the look of the shiny materials. Has that kind of concept car, concept vehicle look, like something brand new. But you don't want it to be too shiny, because then it can hide a lot of the forms, and also maybe not look quite as functional. I mean, this is a robot built for fighting, so you can see on the upper thighs there, the material's kind of, I don't think it's quite working, so I'm going to need to go in and fix that at some point. But it's easy to do. So we have a really good base to work with now. So I'm kind of just playing again with the materials, with the lighting, trying to decide a direction, what I want to do. So here I just added an overlay layer. This is how I do a lot of my panel lines, at least to start off with. So add an overlay, pick kind of first I just kind of draw a couple panel lines actually in there, pick a color, kind of a medium color, either just grab it from the image, or usually I'd go with a gray and around 50% black white, 50% gray. And then when you draw it in overlay, you can see it actually doesn't really show up so well. I like to do a couple different panel lines, just a couple different angles, and then when you go in, you'll still need to go back in and erase away or do another layer of details on top of panel lines like this, just in order to get them to look right with the lighting, because it does a great job of kind of doing things quickly, but in order to get to fully match the lighting, you're going to have to go and just kind of massage things there. So there I just selected everything on the knee and used, I have it set up to Control W in Photoshop, and I'm just warping it. So here, just doing the freeform translation, I think it's called. And then on top of that, I just do my warp and make it so the panel lines fit this knee. And I'll need to do some cleanup on there, but it gives me a good base. So here I'm going in, and I just use the burn tool just to make that darker, or the dodge tool, whichever one, and that way you don't have to go in and repaint things or whatever, but it just darkens it up so that it matches the lighting happening on that knee. So you can see when you use a thicker brush how the panel lines can look, how they're like larger sections that are pushed in. So it's just varying that up. It's nice. So you're just selecting it, adding it, adjusting it so it works with perspective a little bit better here. Well, that's definitely way too bright for that section. That's not better, so you can adjust my opacity so it's not quite so strong. Matches the lighting better of the render in that section, of the model in that section. Here I'm just adding some line variation, some other little details around here. So a lot of times when I am adding these panel lines, I'll kind of look at just where the light's falling on the forms, or where it looks like there might be some implied panel line or something. Also think about, if this thing were real and was actually being constructed, where might they want to have different sections on the actual object. So just kind of bouncing around, adding detail. It's a pretty quick way to add detail. It's kind of fun to do too. I didn't quite match the perspective, so I had to adjust that. So you can really see got some strange artifacts happening on the upper thighs. The render was a little wacky there, so I'll definitely have to go in and kind of paint over that, fix it. You can see those large thigh plates with this perspective definitely get distorted. They look pretty small, but I think it works okay. His knees are supposed to be bent. It's kind of from a low angle. You get to see those cool blue fin things inside of there, so I think it works fine. So here I'm just kind of going back and forth, checking out, see how I did the panel lines on the other leg, match it over here. So there you can see it was kind of doing it segmented, that line segmented. So if you just hold down Shift when you're drawing, and you can go from kind of point to point, and we'll do a straight line between 2 points. adjusting for perspective a little bit. So you can see here's another part where the lighting doesn't quite match up. Well, that's not so bad. I'll probably go back and adjust that at some point. So again, just kind of trying to match what I did on the other leg. It's a slightly different point of view here, so this knee pad's covering more of that bottom shin piece. It's a nice thing about these panel lines. They can help to accent some of the other forms. Nice, because with the bevel and emboss effect I have on there, it just takes care of the lighting automatically. It looks pretty nice. Here you can see I'm just trying to figure out if I want to put that other places, because it looks cool. The light's pretty darn nice, so. But I think I might be going overboard if I add them everywhere here, but those work alright. So just drawing the shape, then going in and moving it around so that it matches the perspective of the object under it. Oops, grabbed the wrong part there. A little big, so just use my lasso. I'll just distort it so it's about the same size as the other one. So here I'm just going back and adding some more detail around that lower leg area. Maybe that circular thing is some kind of gas cap or whatever. Put a couple fins in, maybe cooling fins. Maybe they're places where you can grip to pull off a section. So I'm going to move up to the chest plate here. Same kind of thing. Just trying to figure out, some forms to, or some lines to accentuate that form. Bring some more detail in there. So I had that kind of angular tooth type thing, jagged panel lines on the knees. So I'm thinking about bringing that up into the chest plate here. Just adding some line variation. Maybe these are thick parts, maybe are holes that go all the way through the panel for cooling or something, I don't know. Again, I have those different dots on the legs, so just bringing them up here into the chest, seeing if it works. I'm not sure about these. Just grabbing it, selecting it, flipping it, so I have to draw it twice. Being able to transform things and warp things is really nice. Saves a lot of time, for sure. Just going back in and cleaning it up. Using warp. And just going back and drawing over it anyway. So here I'm kind of changing my mind, taking out the holes. hard time here getting something I like. It's not bad. It looks a little bit like a face, though. It could work, maybe. Alright, so here, we're going to start over again. Things definitely don't always work out the first time. Heck, something like this can work. So you're bringing back those kind of the tooth panel line type things, maybe a little bit. That's pretty cool. Bring some pretty cool shapes in there, I think. And again, echoes what's going on other parts of the design, which is always a good idea if you can have repetition like that. Again, just between the different points, just hitting shift. So it draws a straight line between it. It's not quite matching the perspective right now, but we'll just see how this turns out. You can always adjust it later. You know, a lot of times too, once you start adding decals and kind of surface texture and all the other things down the road that you add, these panel lines end up not being quite so important. But at this stage, it can be easy to kind of get caught up in making it look right. I think generally something like this is going to work out fine. Just adding that variation to the panel lines here, so maybe it has little sections where you can grab into it, holes where there's vents maybe. And we're definitely getting a face there now. It's kind of a robo alligator or something. Just putting some real small lines in here. Again, depending on what the purpose of this image is, you're probably not going to want to go into this kind of detail or care that much about how panel lines are going to look that much at this point. But for the purposes of this, I think I want to come up with a pretty polished image, so I think it's worth putting the time into it. So here I'm just erasing away parts, so kind of playing with things. Also just burning and dodging different parts so it matches the lighting. Don't want it to be too overwhelming, but you want to be able to notice it somewhat. This can take time. You get fast at it, but I have definitely found that going the extra mile and putting this kind of level of detail into things, generally, production designers, directors, whatever, they respond really well when you add surface texture, when you have panel lines, when you have detail either really drawn out and thought out or implied. It really helps to make your image stand out, compared to others. But that means you got to put in the extra time. Let's just Adding a little bit of fine detail with panel lines, kind of smaller ones. So this chess piece is looking a lot less like one solid mass, like something that's maybe actually built and assembled. Alright, so I think this piece is, it's pretty much done. It's pretty much there. Definitely getting a face vibe from it, but I think it'll be able to hide that down the road with other things in it. Maybe get rid of these eyes. That helps quite a bit. You know what? Let's just go ahead and just scrap it and start all over on that. I'm just kidding. I think I need to move on. Alright, so I'll go up here on the head. Just trying to use some of the similar shapes for panel lines I've used already. It's kind of curved lines mixed with angular lines. So you change your opacity and flow so that the panel lines are not as deep. Just adding some more kind of secondary lines in here. Some lines on the face. I'm going to need to come in and paint over that face quite a bit. Get that to make sense. So on his back, he's got these like thruster type things. Add some little lines in here. Maybe these openings kind of hinge open or something. Add some lines along the bottom. I'll come back and put some text on here and stuff. Some warnings, those kinds of things. All this stuff, the panel lines, text warnings, all the things that you're adding here in the in this paint over stage, helping to make it seem more realistic, adding detail, but actually making it look like something that maybe was actually built. So I'll just go into the other thruster and just kind of try and match what I did. Just zoom out so I can actually see the other one. Just a mixture there of using my point-to-point drawing and just kind of freehanding it. I'm thinking about putting kind of a large circular shape. So one thing that's nice when you're doing this painting with panel lines using layer effects is you can go in and paint like a large dot, then erase the middle, and then it's going to paint the highlights in there to make it look like it's you got something that's going in and then like some other little object that's sticking out. And you can do that. You can keep drawing those dots increasingly smaller going in, and it just looks like you got bolts and nuts and stuff inside that. So just drawing a large dot and erasing parts away. It's a real easy way to get some cool detail. Here I'm using my shapes again. That circular shape. Maybe it's some kind of cap or something. Just working around the model. And the panel lines to all these larger shapes. Trying to vary the thickness again. Adjusting it so it works with the perspective of the shape. So a lot of times you gotta be careful when you're doing the panel lines, because you can if you don't go with the form, if you don't go with perspective, you know, you'll give the illusion that that shape has some form other than what it actually does. And sometimes that can work to your advantage if that's what you want to do, but it's just a good idea to work with what you have. You just at least have to be aware of it. That's looking nice. Coming over the other side here. Just trying to match what I did over there. So it's a little bit more at an angle. Doesn't have to be perfect, but if you can get it close. So here it looks like there's kind of that ridge with the light was kind of right along, so let's put a panel there. It's maybe a little too light. So I'm actually going in and darkening them up. It's a nice thing about using that medium grays. You have it's a good base. You can then lighten or darken, and depending on the lighting and depending on what you want to do. Sometimes it makes more sense for a panel line to be darker, like it's catching the shadows. Sometimes like it's catching a highlight. You just kind of emphasizing what the layer effects are going to do. Going into this bicep piece here, just kind of trying to accentuate the forms that are already there. Some little bolt or vent holes or something. I'm going to need to come in and do some painting over on this hand for sure. Put this kind of top of the hand guard thing. Put a couple panels in here. So put a couple panel lines on the fingers, but I'm going to need to come back and work over those. Lighting's just a little bit wacky. I think it's because I don't think I had turbo smooth on those. So the reflections weren't working really well with a small amount of polygons I had to work, or I had to use. Here again, just trying to match what's on the other side. A little bit different perspective. So here I'm drawing my large circle, going inside of it, erasing it away, putting another one inside of it. Do the same thing again here. It's a real nice technique to get some kind of cap type detail real quickly. Just kind of taking a look around, darkening up some things, panel lines on the head. You can see when you're using an overlay on the parts on his head, like where there's that real bright white shine, your panel line's pretty much not going to do anything in those areas. You're gonna have to, if you want an actual panel line to cut through that, you're gonna have to go back and use like a layer just as a normal layer or multiply or something like that, because with using an overlay layer, it doesn't show up. So just adding a couple panel lines to these side pieces, erasing it away to match the lighting. a couple on these big shoulder pieces here. I'll definitely be adding some text or something to those things. You don't want to go overboard with the panel lines on these larger armor pieces. And one of the nice things about those larger pieces is that they offer some variation from the background, kind of higher detail level of that stuff behind. So here I'm going in, I'm switching up, going to just using my different smudge brushes. And here I'm going to go in and just actually paint some on top. Just making it work with the lighting a little bit here. Let's add a little bit rim light on this edge just so it pops out. Clean this up here, add some rim lighting. Okay, just so that edge kind of pops. So with the smudging I'm doing here, I'm switching smooth blend brush here. The blending here, you kind of want to match some of the reflections and things that you have going on in other places, so you don't want it to be too smooth. And I know also that I'll be going in and adding some scratches and stuff on top, some other type of surface overlays, so it doesn't have to be too perfect. So here are these sections in the stomach, kind of echoes, stomach muscles. Just popping them out from the background. Kind of blue lighting on top, that orangey lighting on the bottom. I'm just going to kind of go around the model a little bit here and pull out or pop out some of the edges. You can see these pistons near the groin here. In the model, when I was grouping the different sections, I grouped those with the pelvis, with the lower torso. So when I moved the legs out, they didn't stay connected. So I'm just going to draw in some pieces here that look like they connect. Some quick little panel lines in there. Do some panel lines in this cod piece thing here. Kind of similar panels to, or similar panel lines style to other ones I've done. You want to stay consistent. Just clean this up here. These kind of pulley things. Maybe they're guns or something. There's my camera in the chest. I'm going to need to come back and work on that a little bit. Here I'm adding another layer. Going to do some self-shadowing. So I just use a multiply layer. I'm using kind of a little bit of a bluish gray here. Don't want it to be too dark, too strong. I'm using a hard round brush. I'd like to use the hard round brush just because you can start off with it being pretty precise, and then you can always go back and smudge it, but you can't really go the other way. So, and a lot of times the hard round actually looks nice. It really helps to pop it out from the background. So that's the main point of doing this right now, is just being able to separate out some of these different forms, so it's not quite such a mess of shapes. Be able to pull out, especially these outer armor pieces. So I'm just thinking about where my lighting's coming from. Thinking about, it's probably up and to the right, so I'm dropping my shadow down to the left. You can see I'm not really worrying about coloring in the lines too much here. I'll come back and fix that. Just checking the different pieces. These things are really standing out a little too much. Just going to put some shadow on them from those thigh pieces. Maybe his head sticks out over that plate. So there I'm just selecting the transparency from the whole layer and deleting all the parts of the self shadow that were outside of the bounds of the actual robot. Just a quick way, instead of going in and manually deleting where you painted outside the lines. So here I pick my smudge brush and I'm just smudging parts so where the shadows may be a little too precise. Kind of keeping it at a medium zoom level here. So now I'm going to go back in here, add a new overlay layer. I'm going to put in the lighting for that large shield. So the nice thing about that kind of laser shield is that it's going to be able to cast some light. It's always good whenever you can add a rim light to something. So this thing's going to kind of highlight that right side. So I could really kind of pop out the silhouette, accentuate some of those forms over there. And it just adds some interesting lighting to it. So I'm going to really want to go in and lighten up that very far edge, right where the arm is, kind of meets the shield. But now I'm just kind of working on the face. I'm going to need to go back and spend some time there. So on these different pieces, just kind of doing some strokes along the lines where it looks like it might be reflecting on the shapes of this armor here. Then at some point I'll go back in and work the edges a little bit more. I can do that a little bit now. So this is where it's going to be brightest, is right up here against this arm, or against the shield rather. So it's starting to look pretty good. So here I'm just doing some kind of large scale lighting. You can add a little bit over here on the other side. Not as much as on the side near the shield, but you know, a lot of times light will bounce off one piece and go to another, and it's just good to have hints of it in other places. Just renaming the layer. It's always a good idea to have your layers named, especially if it's a file that you're delivering to a client, you know, who wants a Photoshop file. If things are labeled, it's going to make things a lot easier for them. And if you ever need to go back into the file and, you know, if your client wants a version of it with no shield on, you can just click those off, whatever. Adjust the lighting real easy. So here I just did another overlay layer. Gonna just kind of working the lighting a little bit, adding some highlights, trying to pull those armor pieces out a little bit more. Add some kind of reflective properties to it. So a new layer, this is for the eye glow. I like using the linear dodge, the additive one, for glows. And I'll typically start out with pretty somewhat saturated color for the kind of larger scale glow parts. That's nice, you know, when you have glowing eyes like this, it can kind of help to do a backlighting or underneath lighting for these different shapes in the face. But then I'll go back in and kind of for the center part of the eyes, do like a white, just so you can kind of see where the light is emanating from. Here we go. It just kind of gives it that lens effect look. Here I'm just messing with if the eyes were perhaps a different color, you know, maybe going with red eyes. But I think having it match the shield is better. You don't want it to look like a Christmas tree or Las Vegas or something. So I'm going to go ahead and grab the section of the lower, kind of the abs there, pull it up and use it for this section of the neck. Just shrink it down and repaint it. I'm going to add a layer mask on here. Basically just make it all disappear, then paint it back in where I want it. It's pretty nice. I like that detail quite a bit, so just using that again in a different spot, different scale works. That what was in that neck area was just not working at all. So that's looking pretty cool. Just adjusting the lighting on it. And we're in pretty good shape.